You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where we have past podcasts, blogs, and a couple items for sale. So check us out, beardedtheologians.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this week's show. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
This week on the Bearded Theologians, we're still living into our Live Like Wesley series, and this is going to be the last week of this kind of little series that we've done. And one of the quotes that we kind of stumbled upon in looking in John Wesley's letters was from a letter to Joseph Benson, when he said, "An ounce of love is worth a pound of knowledge." It's a kind of a common quote given to John Wesley. And so, Zach, as you think about that, what comes to mind?
Well, it's really fun. So the context of this letter, I mean, it's pretty short. And old John Wesley is talking about books. And what really strikes me is they're having, it appears that John and Joseph have this relationship a lot like you and I do. It's through correspondence, it's through the media that they had at the time. And they're talking about books and hoping to get to meet at some point in time. And in this long conversation about the books that they have and hope to have in the future, John ends this letter with, "An ounce of love is worth a pound of knowledge. I am, dear Joseph, your affectionate brother." And I think that's really, really interesting. To me, it's Wesley saying, hey, we can have all of these books, but if we don't get out of our head and listen to our heart, all we have is knowledge, and who cares, right? Love is so important in conjunction with knowledge, right? They have to go, the head and the heart have to go hand in hand, if you will, in what we do with our hearts and how we listen and how we love weighs so much more than what we know. And to let our heart drive ourselves, I think, is really important. And I think just briefly reading this letter is what he's getting to, and to put that weight of importance on love and knowledge is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah. Could you imagine if John Wesley had a podcast today? He'd probably call it "Plucked Out of the Fire" by John Wesley, or something along those lines of,
it'd be a 4-hour podcast.
The World is Thy Parish, hosted by John Wesley. With guest host George Whitfield.
They would just argue for 4 hours.
And then I can see it now. You know, he'd have Thomas Coke and Francis Asbury on from remotely in from the Americas. And hey, John, why weren't you successful here? I can see that. Like, I mean, it'd be a fun podcast.
Remind us again how you failed here.
But I think that's true. When we look at this, it was definitely a sense of drawing him in, that not to spend too much time on knowledge, but that, that love is definitely key. And I think we hung up on that far too often, of just like, I've got this knowledge, and that's way better than the way that we're acting. And you can apply that to a lot of different things. I don't know. One of the scriptures that always comes to mind, is in 1 John, where it's, we love because God first loved us. And man, I don't know, if your theology is not centered around love, I really would, ask you to question yourself whether it's a healthy theology. And if you're spending too much time in books, like I know people that's all that they do. I mean, and they can quote things like crazy, but yet, like, when it comes to loving people, they're not good at it. And I really think that it's a balance of the two. I think you have to have both. I'm not saying that all you need is, heart. You do need a brain to be able to process and think and all this stuff. But I do believe that if you're not willing to balance the two out, you'll find yourself out of balance and out of whack.
Right. And that's something that as Methodists we certainly believe in, is the higher education process and educating ourselves as pastors. So the knowledge is important. Don't hear us say that, because you can go too far the other direction of, I just have my experience. Great. what are you backing that up with, right? It's that healthy relationship, if you want to be really Wesleyan, between scripture, tradition, reason, and experience.
You're right.
I can repeat them. And how do we have a healthy relationship between all of that, right? And if we fall too much on one, it begins, you get in your head too much, or you get in your heart too much, or you get stuck in this rut that doesn't allow you to see people for who they are, doesn't allow you to see people like Jesus sees people, right? And I think that's what this gets at. An ounce of love is worth a pound of knowledge. You got to have them both, and they both have their own weight. And let us put those together and let them work together, and not be opposed to one another. Because sometimes we'll do that. Well, we know this, and this is what we read and what we learned, but it opposes this action, or it opposes this way that we love people, or it opposes this, and that's not good. That doesn't live into what Scripture tells us to love, right? Love your neighbor, love because you were first loved. This is my new commandment. Go. All of the things that we learn throughout the entirety of Scripture, whether it's Jesus in the Gospels, whether it's one of the disciples or the apostles, or even when we go into the Old Testament and look at God's love there. We've got to have that healthy dynamic of love and knowledge, tradition, Scripture, whatever you want to go with, or all of it together. Really,
you really struggle with the order of that stuff, don't you? Scripture,
I'm not worried about the order of it so much as I am repeating, one of them and leaving one out.
Well, and I think that's the case. Is that how we practice our faith, I think, matters. And it's one thing to have all the knowledge, but I love that Bob. There's a Bob Goff quote in Love Does. He says, and I'm really paraphrasing Bob here. And Bob, if you want to come on the show and correct me, feel free to. But he talks about how stalkers have all the knowledge. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm really paraphrasing here, but because this is what I remember. But
I like how you're talking to Bob Goff like he's listening.
Like he's listening. I mean,
he's not listening.
Maybe some search analytics will catch it. But I think of like that stalkers have the knowledge, but someone who really loves will, show love and, have that sort of thing. And I think that's where it is like how we practice it really matters. And if we have that knowledge and we practice it rightly, like it's one thing to have all the knowledge. And if we share that, like being able to share that is an act of love. But actually, like, having the knowledge but being judgmental, is that sharing love? I mean, I don't think it is. And so I think that's a good thing to think about, especially, we just came off, last night was Maundy Thursday, and our theme in Maundy Thursday at our worship was, this is the night of love. Mm-hmm. And, having that kind of carrying that with us into Good Friday, into Easter, and thinking that this really is how God, showed his love for us. And, some of that's hard to swallow. And I think that's the struggle that we live into today is how are we showing love? And that, it's one thing to know about love. I mean, we can read all about it. I mean, there's all sorts of books on love. But if we're not sharing that and experiencing that, I mean, it drastically shows. And I think that's a good thing to reflect on, especially.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we can know about love all we want, but if we're not practicing it, if it's not coming out in our actions, our words, who cares?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to encourage you to go on our website at beardedtheologians.com. We have some great past podcasts and a few blogs and some items up for sale. We rolled out a new t-shirt last week. That's really kind of cool.
Yeah, we did.
And so, check us out, beardedtheologians.com. So for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
We hope you've enjoyed the conversations that we've had today on the Bearded Theologians Beardcast, and we'd encourage you to continue those conversations online at beardedtheologians.com or on our Facebook page. We also hope that you pick up a couple of coffee mugs to satisfy your coffee mug collection. Have a good day. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold. Sorry. I was working.
I'm gonna focus on being slow, and I'm gonna say the wrong name.
So I worked on I redid our intro, and
Mac would be proud of you.
yes, he would be proud of me.
Oh, that poor intro goes out.
That definitely goes in the outtakes. All right, here we go again.